Welcome, everybody, to the Too High Podcast, the last Too High Podcast of 2021. Diante, Lee, what's going on?
Right now, I am outside braving the elements. A lot of family for the holidays, trying to get my work done. But I'm good, man. I'm good. How's everything in Montreal?
It's good. It's my sister's birthday today, actually, December 30th. So going to she's in town. She doesn't live here. I'm going for dinner there at my mom's tonight. Restaurants are closed here, basically. So picking up dinner and then I'm going to go eat it with the family. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
A country's response to COVID. Man, I have no idea what that's like.
Yeah. It's frustrating, but I get it and I'm not mad at it. You know what I mean? Like, we're getting a curfew like soon. It's all happening again, just like it was last winter. But again, I understand it. I'm not mad at it. It'll pass, I think. Let's get into some football. And we are... by the time everyone's listening to this, it'll be the morning of the college football playoffs, finally. And I guess my question to you is going to be, said the same stuff for 3 weeks now. Has anything changed going into like final day here? Like, do you still think it is? Okay, you know what? This is how I'm going to frame it. Has Michigan or Cincinnati, in your own mind, done anything differently now in this 3 weeks that you've had time to wrestle with your thoughts to make you believe either of them can win?
Short answer is no. The long answer is I probably see more pathways for a Michigan to beat a Georgia because I still just need to see it from them offensively. We'll see. George Pickens looked okay for that one over-the-top catch in the SEC championship game. If he's all the way healthy, then I'm probably right back to saying that this is the worst matchup possible for Michigan. So we'll kind of get a look at that early in the game, I'm assuming. For Cincinnati, no. No. Honestly, not that it's going to be a walk for Bama, but again, when we talk about pathways to winning, I just don't see it in the same way as for Cincinnati that I see it for Michigan. And even with Michigan, I kind of find that to be more of a Georgia would have to lose that game than Michigan can come out and win it.
Yeah, I think with Cincinnati, I've said this all along with like the way they play defense, it can give Alabama trouble. I also say that like Ritter can make plays out of structure that may be enough if he plays like lights out. If he's like, if he just makes these type of once in a lifetime type of scrambles and throwing weird stuff happens and he's just that type of player, because he's been close to that, but he will have to be like, the best version of that. But he is that type of player, but it would just take so much more, I think, to beat a Georgia team that. And the one thing I'll say about both Georgia and Bama is this one game for both teams in the SEC championship game is probably not representative. Well, I think it's for sure not representative of Georgia's defense, especially against a team like Michigan. And it's possible that it's not representative for an Alabama offense that had looked shaky heading into the SEC championship game. That would be my kind of pulling Alabama down a bit and propping Georgia back up. That would kind of be my thing. And what Georgia does when they play against teams that want to try and run the football and establish a line of scrimmage and do all the stuff like pulls and counters and stuff like that. They do knock them out mostly, and that scares me if I'm Michigan, because I think one of the issues is like so much of them is like creating a little bit of space for their running backs and then having the running backs be really good players. I just don't know if you can create that space against Georgia.
Yeah, the more I think about it, it's like the SEC championship game wasn't about Alabama doing excellent things offensively. It was about their quarterback just going into another dimension. I don't believe that to be something that Michigan's quarterback room can do. and I definitely would not pick them to do it against Georgia. Like, I think that what happened was very specific to Bryce Young and having a guy like a Jamison Williams on your roster, right? That unguardable piece is kind of what I took away from that game mostly. And like I said, I just don't see that in the cards for Michigan. Like you were saying about Cincinnati, like Desmond Ridder might actually be my favorite quarterback outside of like Bryce Young in college football. I'm always going to be kind of biased to guys who have a ton of reps, who've basically been a starter since they were a freshman and has led a successful program for the entirety of his time. So I would not put it past him to be able to create enough offense to keep them competitive, because I kind of do like what Cincinnati is defensively up against a team like Bama. But yeah, like you're saying, I mean, the the pathways to success for both of these programs, it feels a little far fetched, at least as far
Yeah.
as the winning goes. Being
And
competitive,
honestly,
I expect competitiveness, but winning, I just don't. I can't get there yet.
it's tough to find so many pathways for teams that are whatever it is, 14-point underdogs, and I think between somewhere between 7 and 9 point underdogs for Michigan. So like, I mean, at the end of the day, these are the matchups that we're getting, and I think that scares me. And I've said this before, like Michigan's a really good team, and it's always going to take time to be like, a team that we didn't expect to be very good this year is now in the playoffs. So it's like, oh, well, maybe that's just a fluky season. No, they're very, very good. They're elite. It's just that they don't match up well against Georgia, I think, offensively. And I think Georgia has probably just enough playmakers. Even if Stetson Bennett is just okay, they have more playmakers, I think, on the outside in the passing game. Whereas, and James Cook is a good running back, but like, Michigan, I think, has the edge in running back. However, are you able to create the explosive plays you need in the running game this week that you have the whole season? That I don't know, man.
I mean,
I don't know.
literally nobody else has done it this year against this defense. That's the thing. If there
Yeah.
was a point of reference, I might believe it, right? If Kentucky would have had a great day running the ball and still
That
lost,
it's the
I would have been
Kentucky
like,
game. That's
okay,
for me is the
exactly. I'd have been like,
one.
okay, maybe, possibly, I might be able to see it. But even the Kentucky game, their best offensive drive was like 16, 17 plays, for like 72 yards. Like they had to scratch it out all the way down the field. So to me, it really is. It's weird to use Kentucky, I think, as a corollary for Michigan. But when you talk about styles of play, that is the one that I immediately went back to. You can look at Arkansas as well. I mean, Georgia just absolutely took the face off of Arkansas's offense every time they tried to run the ball. So that's my concern, is that you're going to end up in these 2nd and 9s, these 2nd and 8s. And again, we said this when we were on Split Zone Duo with Richard Johnson, but if you're telling me that your best bet to beating this team is relying on them to make mistakes that they hadn't made all year long again, I'm not rolling with that. So I think that we are kind of talking about, this slow death march back to a rematch, like I think everybody felt right after the SEC championship game.
Yeah, and like, this is how they wanted it to play out, because
Or
or
else
else
they would have
they
played
might
them in the
have played
semifinal.
played them in the
Yeah.
semis, right? This is what they wanted, and this is what most likely they're going to get. I think, Cincinnati's defense, if they hold Alabama down, not saying they win, but if the defense holds them down, I think we'll look at the loss of Mechie as really one of the biggest reasons why. Because if they can go one-on-one with Jameson Williams versus Sauce Gardner, and you're able to deal with that. Now that's a tough ask, but if Cincinnati's defense is able to deal with that one-on-one, and then you don't have a guy like Mechie going against somebody else. I know, and again, I know Kobe Bryant won the Thorpe Award, but like Mechie probably wins that one-on-one. They don't have that anymore, right? And then you're talking about tight ends having to be a player. You're talking about Slade Bolden having to be a player, something like that. That's where I'm like, if I see, like, if I didn't watch the game and then I wake up the day after on Saturday morning and I see Alabama 18 points, 21 points, I'm thinking that's probably how it played out. I think.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. And it's just funny. It's funny, like there's some variance. I think there's a level of variance that can come out of these games that still kind of gives me some pause for both of the underdogs in terms of their defense because they're both so man heavy, right? Like, so I keep trying to tell myself, hey, maybe you just have one of those days where your hair's on fire in man coverage. So that to me is the one thing that I'm really trying to clutch onto in terms of like the underdog narratives is that these defenses, they play such tight coverage. Especially in Michigan's case, they do have pass rush or like elite pass rush to go with that man coverage. So, maybe you get another 2-3 turnover Stetson Bennett type of game that keeps you around. But again, I mean, you got to put the ball in the end zone when you have it. And I'm just not sure I see it for these teams. I do think that, again, Cincinnati can move the ball on Alabama. It's just like, to me, you're walking into that game with the mentality that you've got to put up 28-31, I think, just to be competitive. It's a tough ask, man. That is just a tough ask if you're talking about Nick Saban getting 2-3 weeks of prep for your team as well.
Yeah, when I watch Cincinnati's offense, it's like, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but it's very cookie cutter. They just kind of play offense. It's a lot of like inside zone split. You know what I mean? It's like the offense that people run, and that scares me. If they just can't get anything going on the ground, if they can't win the line of scrimmage, which is probably an underrated thing that they've done over the last 2 years offensively, like offensive line, Cincinnati's offensive line. Because we talk about the defense, we talk about Ritter. The receiver Alec Pierce is pretty good, but I think they've won a lot of line of scrimmages in this long winning streak, or I guess long regular season winning streak at least. So now you're playing against probably one of the more underrated D lines to a certain degree, and it's only underrated for, I think, for people who don't watch a lot of college football or just think about college football as an NFL prospect. Through an NFL prospect lens, because the Anderson kid out of Alabama is the best player in college football. So, like, are they going to win the line of scrimmage against this? And like they have Phil Mathis and stuff like that. Like that would scare me. And then it puts it all on Desmond Ritter. And again, good quarterback, but man, he's going to have to play out of his mind. Not just in throwing the ball from the pocket, but just making plays out of it.
Okay, I'll kind of pivot this, because I think that you're kind of taking me where I was interested in going, which is like a little bit more player-centric. If there's one player on any of these four teams that is like that is good enough to break the game, right? That changes the game basically on their own shoulders, who would you choose for that?
Wow, good question. Do you have an answer?
I was actually going to go with the guy that probably does not have as high a profile as some of the people you'd assume, but it would probably be Ojabo from Michigan as that secondary rusher, some guy who can just tear up the field because Aiden Hutchinson, I think, has drawn so much attention, especially in terms of like media narrative, right? Like, if you want to talk about a quote-unquote unexpected guy, I actually think that you can make an argument that he's been, a top five, one of the top five most productive edges this year. I can see a guy like that as that number 2 rush type. You might have a tackle that can handle one, or you might be able to slide your protection to take care of one of these guys, but not both. So to me, that's kind of my pick, is that sneaky guy who can break a game. The only other one I can think about is actually playing in that same semifinal, and that would be, it's not really one guy, it's really the tandem of Cook and White for Georgia as running backs. I think that the flow of the game kind of eliminated them from being used as much as they should have been in the SEC title game. But when I look at, like, if you talk about skill sets, right, like, it's hard to find a backfield that has a more perfect pairing of skill sets than what Georgia has. With those two. So those could be the guys as well that you could see, kind of taking over a game.
So I'll go with, I agree with Ojabo because he is, again, this is a guy who's like top 15 pick in the draft. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously they're going to have their hands full with Aiden Hutchinson on the other side, and Ojabo is just a hell of a player. I'll go with the tight ends on on Alabama and Michigan. Mm-hmm. Eric All has had a really good season, a really solid season. So I think that would be an opportunity because, they're not great on the outside at receiver. Ronnie Bell had played, half a game this year. He was their best receiver going into the season. They found some other guys, but Eric All has kind of come up big in a lot of cases this year, and that one might be that type of under the radar type player. And then I think for Alabama, like we talked about with no John Mechie, maybe you're getting Cameron Latu or you're getting Jalil Billingsley type of game. So I'll say the tight ends there. Obviously, not underrated to a certain degree, but the Georgia tight ends with Brock Bowers, who am I crazy to think Brock Bowers is like the best overall player in any of these four?
He's definitely the biggest mismatch to me. He's definitely the biggest mismatch.
And, we don't know right now. The last I heard about Dax Hill, the Michigan defensive player, no one knows where he is. Jim Harbaugh is not saying whether he's in Florida or not, whether he had COVID or not, or he has COVID or not. So that would, that would
hurt.
Be good. And the problem is they have the other tight end too.
Washington
who's like,
the guy is like, he's a power forward, literally a power forward playing tight end.
Yeah, I think those are the things that I think the underrated guys. I think the tight ends, and I agree, Ojabo for sure, making plays on the other side. All right, let's move on to the NFL. You just wrote about Baker Mayfield. You watched him this last month or so. It hasn't been very good. What is your take?
He's the worst quarterback in the NFL.
That is a big take.
That's kind of where I'm at with it right now. And I honestly, I didn't even, my MO when I started writing the piece really wasn't even about that. Like the piece I was going to write is basically that, like, hey, if we're forecasting out into the future, if this team makes a wild card, they're going to lose because of this guy. It was really it. And I was just going to use the Packers game and really like the Patriots game as like the 2 points of reference in the second half of the year. But just like the more data I took in, I was like, okay, he's bad under pressure right now, but he's also bad in clean pockets. The big red flag. Even on play action stuff, he's like barely scratching league average in terms of his passing grades and his passing production. And then the turnovers have just been like, they've been some of the worst turnovers that we've had in the NFL this year in terms of passing the football. So it's just like, no matter where I look to try to find like a silver lining or something that was maybe a little bit more even-handed, I just kept being smacked in the face that like the data in the film shows that this is like maybe the worst starting quarterback in the NFL right now. At least in terms of production, right? Like, I'm not going to battle with somebody if they say that Mike Glennon starting for the Giants makes him the worst quarterback in the NFL. Whatever. Qualitatively, if you want to say that, in terms of skill set and talent, I'm not going to battle you on that. But in terms of when the ball is in the air, nobody has been worse in the second half of the season than Baker Mayfield. I don't even know if it's really arguable. And a lot of it is like, the pre-snap, processing a lot, and then, being able to anticipate windows and placing the ball properly from there. So we talked about it when they got their asses kicked against the Patriots. That pick that Kyle Duggar had, when they switched to cover 2 last second, right? And not being able to just admit the fact that, hey, I thought I was getting a look. This isn't the look. I don't know what I'm looking at. I'll check the ball down or try to take 3 yards. We'll punt it and we'll come back to it. Multiplying how bad a play is by adding a bad throw on top of a bad read. Like that interception that he threw, in the middle of the field in the first quarter against the Packers, where they're running a Yankee concept. And there was nothing, literally nothing at no point in that play that looked like the big post was about to break open. And he threw it anyways, not under any pressure or duress at all. So it's just like the decision-making has just been so concerning. And the more you just kind of look at where that franchise is positioned in terms of the supporting cast, you look at their contracts, and basically everybody is being paid either at market value or at their performance value. Like their biggest contract is Myles Garrett, and he's probably the best edge rusher in the world right now. They probably have the best running back in the NFL right now, and he's still on his rookie scale deal. You look at their offensive linemen, guys like Wyatt Teller, all these guys who are making, between $40 and $50 million. None of these contracts are out of place, or bigger than they should be, outside of like maybe John Johnson based on his production this year. It's just too bad because I do think he's a good player having a horrible year right now. but everything is in place, right? Like we talk about all the time, building out these environments for young quarterbacks to succeed as they're cheap. And the Browns have done that. Like they have built this up properly, and now they're stuck looking at the biggest hole in their roster being the guy that they drafted number 1 overall. I don't know what the fix is right now. You know, it's not like Mahomes earlier in the year where there was a bunch of bad turnover luck in some of the throws. These are just awful throws that are being picked off.
Yeah, they are.
And there are a lot of the drop picks have also been awful throws. Like the performance could be even worse.
The one where he threw behind on the crossing route. Late,
super late,
and
super
behind.
late. And that should have been, not only should it have been picked, it probably should have been a pick 6 if it's caught, you know? So there's so much left to be desired. I can't imagine, if you're really looking at this pragmatically for Cleveland, that you're not ready to move on in the summer, or at least not extend the guy after this rookie deal.
You know, the flip side to that is, because I agree with you. I mean, everything on tape is bad. It's bad right now. And the only flip side to that is that this is year number 4. And year 1 was very good, especially for a rookie. Year 3, especially the second half of the season, was very good. So you do have those 2 data points where I think that he's been able to, you know, his footwork has collapsed. And I think if he finds a way to rebuild that, because I thought his footwork was tremendous in year 1. I thought he tied his feet to the progression as good as anyone. Again, at least for a rookie, I thought it was as good as you're going to get. He was making all sorts of, I would say dangerous throws. Not dangerous throws, but all sorts of difficult throws. He was making them look easy. And then obviously the sophomore year happens and it's horrifying. And then he comes back with Stefanski, who's like, does a good job putting him in really protected situations, extremely protected situations. I mean, like, I don't know if there was a quarterback that had more runs called when he was on the field, more screens called when he was on the field, and more play action called when he was on the field in 2020. And it looked good. And I thought Stefanski did a really good job of getting him to his first read. It's always going to be tough to continue to get an okay quarterback to his first read every single week. And that's I feel like that's what's happening. And now he's having to make decisions. You know, there's the throw, the throw that he overthrew Landry in the red zone, I think, and like the 25-yard line, where they're running like 3 hooks there on one side of the field, and he kind of like steps into his own tackle and then overthrows Landry by a mile. And, you know, you look at that, and someone posted a screen cap of him as he's throwing the football, and his left foot, his left foot is almost like it's turned inwards as he's throwing. And that's not good. You are just closed off completely when you do that. And like, you don't have to, like, I know the teaching back in the day was like, you know, step with your, you know, if you're a lefty, step with your right foot. If you're a righty, step with your left foot. You know, step with your opposite foot and open up.
That whole like point your toe where you want to throw the ball.
Yeah, point your toe. Like no one's doing that anymore. It's a lot of, hey, you just want to pick it up and put it down. You know, I've said that to kids before. Pick it up, put it down. And the main thing is not, you don't have to point your toe forward. If you're just keep it parallel, that's fine too. But what you really don't want to do is
don't turn your hip. You can't close your hip to your throw.
Because then you're just closing your hip, and we have a problem here. So, you know, seeing his footwork just deteriorate over these years has not helped at all. Maybe there's a chance that he fixes that and then everything is good again. But at the same time, you are living in this world where these type of offenses are helping float the quarterbacks. And you're going to have a year like this once in a while. Now, does that mean he can't come back and be a really good quarterback again if everything falls right? Look at Jimmy Garoppolo. They're going to make their good chance the 49ers make the playoffs now. You know, they drafted a quarterback, and then they might make the playoffs now. We see it with a whole bunch of guys, right? So Maybe. I agree with you. I think it's been horrifying the past 2 months, and they most likely will miss the playoffs because of it.
That's the thing, right? Is that this is not a franchise that's on track to be missing the playoffs or be last in their division, and that's where they're at right now. That's why the alarm bells are going off, right? Like, and me saying, I never say something is going to last in perpetuity. So my criticism of calling him the worst quarterback in the NFL right now is not like condemning him to never be a good quarterback ever again, right? Like that's not the deal. It's just kind of facing a fact, right? Like if the defense has basically treaded water at about league average in most metrics, and pretty good as a pass rushing unit for most of the year. They've gone from having like the best rushing offense in the NFL the first half of the year to like the fifth best in the second half of the year. So they've been ridiculous rushing the football. You have a scheme that's built to protect your quarterback with screens, play actions, these tight condensed sets, all these over routes, bootlegs, and things like that. Like, the entire framework has been built around just needing your quarterback to be okay. If he were just okay, this does not get written. Now, I might say that, like, hey, they might not have a Super Bowl ceiling, but they're still a competitive playoff team. Like, I would have no problem saying that. But right now, when you look at the way that everybody else is playing in comparison to Baker, it's hard to walk away with any other takeaway than he is the thing that's holding this operation back. And it's got to improve, before his rookie deal is up, because they can't afford to have him play like this and be expensive, right? You can't pay him like he was a number one overall pick on his second deal while he's performing like this. That's when it becomes a really big problem.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think at this point, if he would have continued what was happening last year, then for sure you pay him. Even though I think we all kind of looked at it and said, hey, there's a lot of things going right here for them to make the playoffs in 2020, for him to look really good in 2020. But you still probably have to pay him if you got 2 seasons like that. But this season is kind of telling you maybe don't pick up that option. Like maybe that's really not the way to go. All right, if you want to read Diante's article on Baker Mayfield, go to pff.com. And for a limited time, you can get 50% off. That's 50% off PFF Elite subscription, PFF Elite annual subscription if you use promo code ELITEUP. That's ELITEUP. Grades and data are live for every single player who logged a snap last week. What can you get with a PFF subscription? All of PFF's locked article content. That would be Diante's Baker Mayfield piece. PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards. NFL Green Line is up 27 units this season. College Green Line is up 32 units this season. 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team. Player prop tool, which shows positive and negative value for every NFL prop and more. A Christmas gift to you, to yourself. Use promo code ELITEUP for 50% off an entire year of PFF Elite. Okay, next, I hate to bring up this segment. We do it every week, but it is our favorite segment called, of course, Who is the best RPO quarterback in the league? And I'm only bringing this up because I wrote a bit about Joe Burrow, and that connects to what I'm going to talk about here with the RPO stuff. Because we have this discussion all the time. It comes up all the time with Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins offense. And what it's doing. Like, what are the tenets of this RPO offense? What does it mean for Tua and all that stuff? So the first thing is that nobody is running this style of RPO offense in the NFL, unlike the Dolphins. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and because of that, Tua is gaining yards, creating yards that are a little more down the field than anyone else is able to based on scheme. If Rodgers pulls a ball, I've talked about this before, but if Rodgers pulls a ball for an RPO, it's a bubble. Now, that bubble might be to Devontae Adams, who's a really good player. It's still a bubble behind the line of scrimmage. If Tua pulls the ball on an RPO, it is a 8-yard slant route. So if the decision is made and he's making the right decision to throw it, then they're gaining 8 yards. Or it's a slant and they're gaining 6 yards or whatever. So that we have to put into context what type of RPOs they are throwing versus what other teams are or are not doing. So, when you think of it like that, well, what if the Packers were doing stuff like that? Honestly, what if the Bucks were doing stuff like that? Like Brady would be killing like all these really, really good quarterbacks. Even Joe Burrow, who made a living off these slants RPOs in college, they don't do that much with the Bengals. So it's like, what if you put these quarterbacks who we see in other situations be elite, put them in a situation that is giving quarterbacks good yardage that aren't necessarily asking them to be playmakers? Well, what would it look like? And so, like, we have to have this we have to rehash this discussion every week about Tua, especially as they're winning games without really doing much on offense. And I understand bad offensive line, and I'm not ready to kill Tua yet. He's in his second year. He hasn't played a full season yet in either season. So, like, there's always chance for progress there. But I think, like, just looking at it and saying, hey, they're on a winning streak. Hey, he's the quarterback, and hey, he's creating, and they're throwing for yards. Like, that is a problem because of what they do offensively. And how this connects to, like, Burrow is, like, when you look at his draft mates, the two guys drafted around him, which is Burrow and Justin Herbert, they're two guys who play in much more difficult offenses, who don't have the benefit of play action RPOs and are being tremendously good quarterbacks. So it's like, he's still young. I'm not ready to like I said, I'm not ready to kill him just yet. But when you look at the other two guys and how good they are playing in tougher offenses, that doesn't bode too well for Tua. That's just the spiel. We're gonna have this spiel though for the next few weeks and the offseason, but
it's only going to get more extreme, I think, because I think the performances, right, the variance on performances is only going to go up from here. I think that you're going to get your 280-yard, 3-touchdown, no interception games when the RPO stuff is working great, and then you're going to get your 175-yard, no touchdown, 2 interception games when it's not there. And I think that we're going to see stuff like this pop up more often as this stuff continues to proliferate around the NFL, right? Like, it's great. It's great on its own merit that you can create a style of offense in the NFL that makes it viable for a quarterback that we think is flawed to be able to live as a starter in the NFL. But long term,
this is all of our favorite high school offenses. Like, I'm putting this in tomorrow.
I think that, beyond just that, making it viable for a quarterback to be a starter, and I think our own fandom of, what this type of offense means in an NFL context. I think beyond that, it's also going to help push forward what we're doing defensively, which is obviously something that I think is appealing to me. With quarterback play, like, to your point, I do want to see this stuff spread, not only to make it viable for a quarterback that doesn't have the top level of arm talent to be, a starter, a reliable starter at the NFL level. I want to see the best quarterbacks in the NFL do this stuff. I do. I want to see an Aaron Rodgers, ripping glances in slants, against cover 3 and cover 1. That's something that I'm interested in. I do want to see more added, to what the Chiefs are doing in the RPO game. And I think that this opens up the door for that as well. I will say, I'm sure that I'm kind of beating a dead horse, and as are you in this conversation, but like, my biggest concern with the Dolphins specifically, and not so much the RPO, is just the fact that a team like the Jets can say, hey, we're going to play regular road 4 down cover 4, and we're eating up all the space that you thought you would have for these RPOs. That, to me, is more of an indication of the fact that the Dolphins don't necessarily have a counterpunch for what they have, for what they do offensively. But I don't have a problem with Tua, succeeding because of it. I think we talked about it on the Tuesday show, but, their winning streak is about as fake as anybody's so far this year because of the level of competition that they've been playing, especially for their defense and the quarterbacks that they've been faced off against. So I do think that there's some context to be found in the actual performance of the Dolphins this year in terms of their wins and losses. But I do appreciate the fact that they found something functional for the time being And, hopefully they're able to build on that, whether it's for Tua or another quarterback in the future.
Yeah, I will say the one thing is like where there's smoke, there's fire in terms of the trade rumors with Tua. Like, I'm just like, at the end of the day, if through like these anonymous sources, they're thinking about trading Tua, and we all know the quarterback from Houston in the offseason was a trade target. Like,
I mean, and beyond just that,
it
right?
tells
Like
me
there
something.
were reports coming out that people in the locker room were really unhappy when Fitzpatrick left, like
Yeah.
so there still seems to be some. I don't know whether or not that's been resolved or how close to being resolved it
Well,
is.
winning
For
helps that
sure,
stuff a lot, as you
especially
know.
for owners and GMs who want to keep fans invested and people who want to keep their jobs. So we'll kind of see how this all shakes out as this season kind of comes to an end. But yeah, I can't imagine that the trade chatter is going to go away, considering the names that they were interested in trying to bring in. So and it's not like for as cool as it's been to see Tua on this little streak, it's not like he's been playing like Justin Herbert, at his peak so far this year. He hasn't been playing like an MVP candidate. It just hasn't looked like a situation where you're walking away week after week saying like this dude ain't the answer, right? It doesn't look as stark of a situation right now.
Yeah, like it would look like I think we would have an idea of Tua projecting him a little bit better if they just weren't running these RPOs. And now again, the offensive line is bad. I mean, it's really bad. But like also like Joe Burrow has a bad offensive line, and they still manage ways to deal with that stuff. So I think that's where I'm like, I don't know if this is the end for Tua, but everything tells me that nobody there feels good about projecting him as an elite quarterback going forward. That's probably what scares me the most. And again, it's not that RPOs are bad. RPOs are great. Like RPOs create offense, but they're like on a scale of like, hey, what's the hardest throw to make? What's the hardest read to make? This is the bottom here, right? This is the easiest because we talk about this a lot. I think we talked about a lot this past offseason of like, where has quick game gone in college football and even the NFL? And with quick game, we're talking about, concepts that involve slant, flat routes, 6-yard hitches, stuff like that. And especially in college football, they've gone the way of RPOs because we don't want to teach quarterbacks to, if we can take away a read, take away an option for a quarterback and replace it with a handoff to a running back where your accuracy on handoffs is like 99.9%, whereas your accuracy on flat routes is only, even at its highest, like 85%,
right.
Then we'll do that. So that's why we keep saying, like, understand the offense that Tua is playing in and all the stuff that they do to keep him protected. Has been doing just a good enough job. Obviously, the defense has carried them throughout this win streak, but the offense has been league average, I believe, over this time span, and that's been enough. And most of that is on the fact that they don't have to hand the ball off and they can just throw a slant.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I will say, obviously, New Year's is coming, so I kind of want to get you out of here, but before we do check out for 2021, actually, I guess, for people who don't know, kind of peeling the curtains back, Seth and I do a little bit of prep for Sunday Night Football every week. So the question I wanted to ask on the way out is, this season, what has been the one game or the few games that you can think of that you maybe enjoyed doing prep for the most, or the ones that you think have had the most significance in terms of like your prep and the way things have played out, not just in that game, but maybe over the course of the season?
That's a good question. Anytime we get the Packers, which we got the Packers a lot because they are, people are going to tune in to watch the Packers, and that's why NBC likes putting them on TV. That's been fun, and getting to, just like sitting down and going through that tape that LaFleur and Rogers put out LaFleur, Rogers and Adams put out every week has been probably the most fun. I think the first Bills Chiefs game that we had was, I think I don't know how to put this, from like just an interest standpoint, schematic interest standpoint, that was the most fun because we had that matchup a year in the AFC Championship game. Buffalo had been reeling a bit early in the season on offense. They couldn't figure it out. The Chiefs, we didn't know what was going on with the Chiefs at that time, and then that game played out in a way that I don't think either of us
It exposed so
expected at
much, and
all.
it changed
It
so
exposed
much in
so
the
much on
NFL
both
narrative. Like
sides.
it was that was a huge
Yeah,
pivotal game.
that was a big one. Let me think about this one. Okay, well we had the Chiefs Raiders, which is the cover 3 game.
Yes, another really pivotal
So
one in
that
terms of
was
narrative, right? And that was something that we really
yeah,
pointed out, in the prep was like, hey, in terms of an opponent that you want to see, if you're a slumping team like the Chiefs, the way you run offense, like this is the defense that you would like to see.
yeah. That was a super important one. I think early in the season we had the Ravens, that big win against the Chiefs, and then I think we had the 49ers when they lost on the last second field goal to Green Bay. And prepping for those weeks was interesting for me because I really got to see that escort motion that we talked about a lot early in the season, with both teams running that in their way of running the football by creating an extra
Right.
blocker to the side they want to run the football to pre-snap with a
Mm-hmm.
motion, without the defense basically having time to
Right.
adjust to a
Right.
certain degree. And that to me was eye-opening in the way that the Ravens do it in a triple option type of game, and then how the 49ers do it with their outside zone, and I think specifically the way they pitch the ball in their outside zone, with Juszczyk. I would also say like I think the last thing for me is we got a lot of Rams and 49ers
Mm-hmm.
games, and I've had this take before, and it's a little tongue in cheek, but just seeing the way that Cooper Kupp and Kyle Juszczyk are used in very
Yes.
similar
Yes.
ways is hilarious to
Yes.
me. And that's my favorite thing of the whole season is like watching them both run the stock route and stock drift and then being wide open. And in the same weekend, we had well, not in the same weekend because I guess the 49ers played last Thursday, but we saw Jimmy Garoppolo overthrow Mr. Juszczyk on stick
The
on
drift. Mm-hmm.
drift stock. And then I saw the Rams when I opened that tape, and honestly, we can have a whole discussion on how Matthew Stafford is killing us, but they ran it, and Cup got a completion off of the stock route. So like I think that those are for me. For you, I know you obviously worked more on
Right.
defense, so you did a lot of like looking at like how the
Mm-hmm.
matchups in these Sunday night games have played out. Was there anything for you?
So to me, I mean, Chiefs Ravens, the week 2 game that ends in that last minute drive by Lamar. That was a big one because we spent so much of the time kind of talking about like, hey, the perspectives that we have on the option, right? And that we're talking about 2 option offenses. It's just different approaches to option offense. That was a big thing. This was before the Chiefs kind of had their big slide, in the midseason area. So that was one that I had a lot of enjoyment talking about. The Colts Niners game, more so because I think that was kind of the first week where I really looked and was like, I think that there's something really good happening in Indianapolis, but the results haven't necessarily tied up with it because there were still a lot of bad Carson Wentz games happening in the first 2 months of the season. But that was a really good one to look at in terms of the way that they defend the run from 4 down, what they're able to do with Jonathan Taylor when they want to get downhill, and all the RPOs that they try to run to protect Wentz. Like that was a really fun one to look at as well. Um, the Rams, like you said, that's always been interesting from a defensive perspective because there was just so much conversation about like what is Raheem Morris as a defensive coordinator? What is his identity? What does this mean not having Brandon Staley there anymore? Et cetera, et cetera. You got this star-heavy defense. How do you make all this work? So kind of seeing the way that they've evolved a little bit, all the pressures that Morris likes to run, some of the things that he's borrowed in terms of playing with 5 guys at the line of scrimmage, playing quarters on one side and basically like cover 0 on the other to get your run fit back together. Like there's been a lot of really interesting things from that perspective that I've enjoyed to watch. outside of that, I mean, a lot of it really just kind of is like just seeing the different ways that teams defend the pass in the NFL. Like all the different third down packages has been like what's blowing me away. Whether you're looking at, a team like Dallas, right, where you know that they've got these freak athletes and they want to play cover one all the time, but when they get in the dime, now all of a sudden they get into the soft cover two stuff. Same thing that we talked about with like New England. They're a cover one, cover three team. But when they get in the dime, if they're not doing that, they get into cover two and they want to trap throws at the sticks as well. The Chiefs we've had a couple of times, and Spags, is famous for that. These different kind of rotations that you'll see, to take away throws at the sticks and things like that. And then we get a lot of these 3-4 teams that do a lot of the stuff that we've talked about since the offseason, right? Like these 3-4 teams like the Packers, the Rams, the Chargers, et cetera, that run this quarter style, too high defense with your outside linebackers that you can use interchangeably where you're firing, your inside linebackers to get into, these cover three rotations. All of those things, we've seen so much of that as well. That's been a really kind of powerful, kind of marriage in the broadcast, and what we've put on TV is like the most important, performances or most important matchups of the week. And the fact that it kind of ties in with some of the narratives that we've talked about on kind of like this granular scheme level as well. That's been really interesting to see that. And then the last one, it's always an enjoyment for me to watch the Saints because they're like one of the only teams that play defense the way that they do in the NFL.
I thought you were going to say the way the defense should be
No,
played.
I mean, and there's an argument to be made for that, honestly. Like, it's for as much modern defense as we talk within this 3-4 family, like what they do with their nickel package and the way that they play split safety stuff, like that is a lot of what you're seeing from the Georgias, from the Bamas when they're in their 4-down package, right? So to see some of that stuff in the NFL, it's like, okay, like I didn't know that you could do this, but I'm seeing it being done. This is actually viable, and they're really playing tight to routes, and it looks good. So that has been a big enjoyment for me as well. Is kind of checking how these teams kind of get into this too high world that we're seeing all over the NFL now.
I'll hit on two more on offense. One quickly, having to watch the Steelers offense for the two games we had them.
Brutal.
It was abysmal.
Brutal.
Absolutely abysmal. Brutal, man. And then the other thing was week one, the first game of the season, Thursday night, Cowboys Bucks. I think, obviously that was week one, so we just went and did a whole big presentation on in this perspective, the Cowboys offense from 2020.
Right.
And just being like,
that's right.
I get why Dak has a weird narrative around him, because I'm watching this offense and I'm like, oh, this is like hard.
Right. Yeah. Like the degree of difficulty is way up here.
It's way up there. And they've done a good job, I think, of creating some better plays, better concepts for him. And you see now, I mean, obviously we're talking about a 56-point performance on the last Sunday night, but they've changed a lot. Like they don't run shallow cross anymore where routes are coming over the middle. And, I've talked about this before where it's like, hey, we have a dig, a basic in route at like 10 yards or whatever. And we have a shallow cross. And then we have like Amari Cooper on like a 5-yard in route. And he's going through his progressions and he's getting to Amari Cooper on a 5-yard in route. And it's like, that's fucking good football. But guess what? It's 6 yards.
Right. It doesn't look as sexy, but it is good. It's good ball.
Yeah. And now I think they're doing some better stuff. I do think that there's a bit of a grab bag. And again, I don't mean this in a bad way, but a bit of a grab bag from Kellen Moore's offense that works for having this elite type of quarterback. So yeah, watching Cowboys over this past 2 seasons really has been really fun to watch.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So with that, guys, thank you for, kind of going through this whole process with us, from the college football podcast where we talked about the NFL more than college football once I got on, to this kind of rebranded, too high deal that we have. Like, it's been a lot of fun in 2021. We've been working a lot behind the scenes to try to figure out as many different ways as possible to engage with you guys So, look forward to the new year, trying to find some new ways to kind of talk about some stuff in the weeds in terms of scheme in a way that you guys can visualize what it is that we're explaining. So that way it doesn't take away so much from what we're doing on the podcast, right? Because we want to make sure that you guys see the picture as we do it, as we're explaining it. And that'll free us up to have different conversations on the audio and video side of the podcast as well. So, yeah, thank you, Seth, for having me on and inviting me to share the platform with you. It's been good. It's been a really good year so far at PFF, and I'm looking forward to the future. So Happy New Year to you, my guy, and Happy New Year, everybody else. And we will see what's going on in 2022 very shortly.
Does Braxton want to say Happy New Year to the Too High? Is he around?
Braxton, come here. Come here. I want you to say something. Can you say Happy New Year?
Happy New Year.
Say peace.
Peace.
That's perfect. All right, peace, y'all.